प्रभु गिरधारी, सूरदास के गिरधारी, सूरदास के प्रभु गिरधारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी। पीतांबरधारी, मुरलीधर पीतांबरधारी, हृदय विहारी माई मीरा, हृदय विहारी, हृदय विहारी माई मीरा, हरे कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी। हर पीतांबरधारी, पीतांबरधारी, हृदय विहारी माई मीरा, हरी हृदय विहारी माई मीरा, कृष्ण मुरारी, जय कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी, कृष्ण मुरारी। शिव गौरी सुता लंबोधरा, शिव गौरी सुता, हे शिवनंदन बाल गजानन, हे शिवनंदन बाल गजानन, शुभानना गजानना, शुभानना लंबोधरा, शिव गौरी सुता, लंबोदरा शिव गौरी सुता, हे शिवनंदन भव भय भंजन, शिवनंदन भव भय भंजन, शंभ कुमारा गजानना, शंभ कुमारा गजानना, शंभ कुमारा गजानना, कुमारा लंबोधरा शिव गौरी सुता, लंबोधरा शिव गौरी सुता, हे शिवनंदन बाल गजानन, हे शिवनंदन बाल गजानन, गजानना शुभानना, गजानना शुभानना, लंबोधरा शिव गौरी सुता, लंबोदरा शिव गौरी सुता, हे शिवनंदन भव भय भंजन, हे शिवनंदन भव भय भंजन, गजानना शंभ कुमारा गजानना शंभ कुमारा गजानना शंभ कुमारा लंबोदरा शिव गौरी सुता लंबोदरा शिव गौरी सुता हे शिवनंदन मानगजा हे शिवनंदन मानगजा गजानना शुभानना गजानना भानना लंबोदरा शिव गौरी सुता लंबोदरा शिव गौरी सुता गौरी सुता शिव गौरी सुता प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दीजो यशोदा के बाद दर्शन दीजो यशोदा के बाद दर्शन दीजो नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो बाल दर्शन दीजो नटवरलाल दीजो नटवरलाल दीजो दर्शन दीजो नटवरलाल दर्शन दीजो गिरधारी लाल दर्शन दीजो गिरधारी लाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो शोधा के बाद दर्शन दीजो यशोदा के बाद दर्शन दीजो नटवरलाल दर्शन दीजो नटवरलाल दर्शन दीजो दर्शन दीजो नटवरलाल दर्शन दीजो गिरधारी लाल दर्शन दीजो गिरधारी लाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन के बाद दर्शन दीजो नटवरलाल दर्शन दीजो लाल दर्शन दीजो नटवरलाल दर्शन दीजो गिरधारी लाल दर्शन दीजो गिरिधारी लाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल प्यारे नंदलाल दर्शन दीजो प्यारे नंदलाल ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शांति शांति शांति। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनोभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्ठनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Together we will chant the chapter 2, section 2 of Mundakopanishad, chanting mantra 1 to 11, please. Mundakopanishad, chanting chapter 2, section 2. आविः सन्निहितं गुहाचरं नाम महत् पदमैत्रत्वमर्पितं ये जत्प्राणन्निमिषश्च यदेतज्जानथ सदसद्वरेण्यं परं विज्ञानात् यद्वरिष्ठं प्रजानाम् यदर्चिमद्यदुनुभ्योऽणु च यस्मिन् लोका निहिता लोकिनश्च तदेतदक्षरं ब्रह्म स प्राणस्तदुवाङ्मनः तदेतत्सत्यं तदमृतं तद्वेधव्यं सोम्य विद्धि धनुर्गृहीत्वौपनिषदं महास्त्रं शरं हृपासानिशितं सन्धयीत आयम्य तद्भावगतेन चेतसा लक्ष्यं तदेवाक्षरं सोम्य विद्धि प्रणवो धनुषरो ह्यात्मा ब्रह्म तल्लक्ष्यमुच्यते अप्रमत्तेन वेधव्यं शरवत्तन्मयो भवेत् यस्मिन् द्वौ पृथिव्यान्तरिक्षमोतं मनः सह प्राणैश्च सर्वैः तमेवैकं जानथ आत्मानम् अन्यावाचो विमुञ्चतामृतस्यैष सेतुः। अरायवरथनाभौ संहतायत्र नाढ्यः स एषोऽन्तश्चरते बहुधा जायमानः ओमित्येवं ध्यायत आत्मानं स्वस्ति वः पारायतमसः परस्तात् यः सर्वज्ञः सर्ववेद् यस्यैष महिमा भुवि दिव्ये ब्रह्मपुरे ह्येषः व्योमात्मा प्रतिष्ठितः मनोमयः प्राणशरीरनेता प्रतिष्ठितोऽन्ये हृदयं सन्निधाय तद्विज्ञानेन परिपश्यन्ति धीराः आनन्दरूपममृतं यद्विभाति भिद्यते हृदयग्रन्थिः छिद्यन्ते सर्वसंशयाः क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि तस्मिन् दृष्टे परावरे हिरण्मये परे कोशे विरजं ब्रह्म निष्कलं तच्छुभ्रं ज्योतिषां ज्योतिः तस्मिद् यद्वदिष्ठो विदुः न तत्र सूर्यो भाति न चन्द्रतारकं नेमा विद्युतो भान्ति कृतोऽयमग्निः तमेव भान्तमनुभाति सर्वं तस्य भासा सर्वमिदं विभाति ब्रह्मैवेदममृतं पुरस्तात् ब्रह्म पश्चात् ब्रह्म दक्षिणतश्चोत्तरेण अधश्चोर्ध्वं च प्रसृतं ब्रह्मैवेदं विश्वमिदं वरिष्ठम्. So we've been studying the mantra 8. We have covered a couple of paragraphs, but we'll have a quick recap on what we studied so that we'll have continuity of the thought flow. Mantra chanting 8. Bhidyate hridaya granthihi chidhyante sarva samshayaha क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि तस्मिन् दृष्टे परावरे. We'll repeat the mantra. भिद्यन्ते हृदय ग्रन्थिः छिद्यन्ते सर्व संशयाः क्षीयन्ते चास्य कर्माणि तस्मिन् दृष्टे परावरे. So the mantra translation: perceiving the high and the low in that. That means the Supreme God, the Brahman, the reality. Perceiving high and low, once knot of the heart is untied, all doubts dispelled, and actions exhausted. So he is talking about the enlightenment, the Brahman, the Supreme God, and how you will be able to experience Brahman, by what condition, by what nature. Whoever maybe whoever realizes the Supreme Brahman, the God, the Atman, he distinguishes clearly what is the soul, what is the spirit and matter, because human being is made up of spirit and matter. Matter is the body, mind, intellect, and spirit is the Atman, the self, the core of your personality. Whoever realizes, it doesn't matter who you are, from where you are, and what background you have, what age you are, what nationality you are, which caste, which community, which geographical place, which gender, which religion, which educational background, whether you are poor or rich, whether you are Indian or American or whatever nationality, race or religion, it doesn't matter. If you are realizing the Supreme Self, whoever realizes the Supreme Self, Brahman, he distinguishes spirit, the self, from the matter, from the material equipments. Matter being the lower, matter is the lower aspect of your personality, and spirit is the higher aspect of your personality. So, lower and higher, the distinction of spirit from matter, real from unreal, which you need a powerful, subtle intellect which can do this job. Higher facets of Brahman, both are part of Brahman. Brahman has this low and high. The higher is the self, the aspect of spirit, and lower is the matter. Both are in Brahman, expressions of Brahman. He fathoms, whoever realizes this, understands this, he fathoms how they have emerged from Brahman, how both have manifested, expressed from Brahman. All are nothing but expressions of Brahman, this high and low, and how Brahman supports them, how Brahman gives the substratum. He is the substratum of the entire high and low, all the fluctuations, oscillations of this world. So, entire high and low lies in Brahman and Brahman alone only. It is like all waves are nothing but ocean. The ocean has the waves. Without the ocean, the waves doesn't exist. So the high waves and low waves both are nothing but the expressions are manifestations of Brahman and Brahman alone, or ocean and ocean alone. Similarly, the spirit and matter both are in Brahman only. So, whoever realizes the spirit, whoever understands the higher aspect of Brahman, he reaches Brahman. And also, he understands how Supreme Brahman supports the everything, all of this expressed, manifested world, like ocean supports the every wave. Having gained this knowledge of reality, having gained this knowledge of the self, your supreme self, your own original identity, once you understand who you are that Atman, not this what you believe yourself to be, this limited, restricted individuality which you believe yourself is not what you are, but you are that Atman, that infinite reality. Once you gain the knowledge of the self and understand what you are, then the knot of the heart, knot means that ignorance of the self is freed. The knot of the heart is nothing but the Hridaya Granthi. Every human being is born with ignorance of the Supreme Self. this ignorance in the core of the heart. Nobody knows who he is today. The whole world, entire humanity groping in utter darkness of this, entangled in the knot of the heart. This knot of the heart is nothing but avidya, kama, karma. Ignorance, kama, desire, karma, action. This is the caught up in the cycle of birth and death. Ignorance of the self causes the desires, and the desires causes the actions, and you caught up in this cycle of birth and death. This is the knot of ignorance, knot of the heart. Everybody is entangled and meshed at this moment because there is no knowledge of reality, there is no understanding of who you are. Once you gain the knowledge of reality, you break this, you get freedom from this knot of the heart. Hridaya vidyante sarva samshaya. Hridaya grandhi vidyante. Hridaya grandhi, core, the knot of the heart, which is avidya, kama, karma. Everybody is entangled. So this ignorance is freed, and ignorance is, which is the vasanas. Vasanas are nothing but unmanifest desires, which manifests as a desire, and desire expresses as a actions in the world. Everybody is active in the world, in their profession, in their business, in their vocation, occupation. All these things are going on, and they think they are fine. You ask anybody, how are you? I am fine. I am well settled. Where are you settled? In this avidya, kama, karma. And nobody recognizes that this is the avidya, ignorance of the self, and as a result you caught up in desires, and the desires leads to continuous actions, and you are caught up in this endless cycle, which can be broken, which can come out only through knowledge of the self. Having gained the knowledge of the self, having gained the knowledge of the self, the knot of the heart, hridaya granthi, is freed, which refers to this ignorance, desire, and action. So this is what the mantra is highlighting, and in addition to that, it is also explaining the when one attains the self-realization, when one attains God realization, one's vasana, desire, and action disappear. So once you experience Brahman and Brahman alone, like a child who is caught up in the experience of the snake, he misunderstands, he mistakes the rope for a snake. He is complaining, he is panicked, he is worried about. The snake is nothing but a superimposition upon the rope. The rope itself is only existing, but the boy treading on the rope, experiencing a snake. When the boy was exposed to the knowledge of the rope, then the snake disappears instantly. Similarly, when you realize Brahman, when you gain the knowledge of reality, once you gain the Atma Vidya, self-knowledge, one's vasanas, which is ignorance of self, desire, and actions, all disappear. Like once a person, a boy, gains the knowledge of the rope, ignorance of the rope is disappeared. Ignorance of the rope, which causes the snake disappears. This is the law. So entire karma actions is said to be exhausted. There is no more actions. There is no more actions. Why? Because there is no more desires and there is no more vasanas. You reach the infinite state of Godhood, your enlightened state. So the karma refers three types of vasanas. The karmas refers to three types of vasanas. This is the subtle concept where we left in the last class. What is that? They are known as sanchita karma, prarabdha karma, and agami karma. There are three types of karmas, vasanas. Sanchita karma, prarabdha karma, agami karma. These are the three types of one's vasanas. One's ignorance of the self is totally considered these three. Sanchita is karma is the total, is the aggregate of all your vasanas, which separates you from Brahman. The moment Sanchita is gone, you reach the enlightenment. So Sanchita is the total aggregate of all vasanas. What all you have accumulated from the day, from the time you separated from the self, from the moment of separation from the self till today, what all you are, your individuality accumulation deposits, that is called Sanchita, aggregate, the entire stock of vasanas, from which an individual springs. From the Sanchita vasanas, the individuality springs out constantly. A portion of the stock of vasanas surfaces for its immediate fructification, fulfillment. That portion, what you came about from that Sanchita, that portion is known as prarabdha. This prarabdha is nothing but a portion of Sanchita which needs immediate fructification, immediate fulfillment. That is called prarabdha. That is the prarabdha which is the cause for the birth of an individual. So individual comes from the Sanchita, but the individual's cause is the portion of Sanchita which is the prarabdha, a portion of the stock, which is the total vasanas, which is the Sanchita. So from Sanchita, a prarabdha, a little bit of, from total vasanas, a little bit of vasanas, total vasanas, Sanchita, little bit of vasana of total is prarabdha, which causes the birth of the individual. And we are all born with that prarabdha. At the time of birth, we bring in prarabdha. We are nothing but the expression of prarabdha vasanas. This is the formula. And that portion of known as prarabdha which causes birth, every human being is born with the prarabdha karma alone. Every human being or every being is born with prarabdha vasanas alone. For the analysis sake, we are taking human form which is born with this prarabdha karma alone. Prarabdha karma, which is vasanas. The rest of the Sanchita, which is after the prarabdha is taken away, which is born, the rest, the leftover, the karmas, which is in the Sanchita, which is for future manifestation, for further manifestation, remains in Sanchita. That the lot of vasanas yet to come and remain unmanifest form in Sanchita is called agami karma. So agami, Sanchita and prarabdha. Thus, Sanchita minus prarabdha vasanas or karmas is equal to agami. This is the formula. Now, you got to understand the current condition of what is the human being capacity, how human being has the unique privilege to reach the highest state of enlightenment and what he is supposed to do in his lifetime to get to his infinite state of peace and bliss, and his ultimate goal of his existence is by understanding this portion that human being alone has the capacity to exhaust the entire Sanchita, whole aggregate of all vasanas, and reach the enlightenment. That is the only way to reach the Supreme God, the Brahman, the ultimate goal of human existence, which no human being is understanding and pursuing and reaching it without, because of lack of knowledge and awareness. What he has to do? destroy the sanchita, exhaust the sanchita. So then what are you having right now? Access you are living with prarabdha. Prarabdha is the individuality which you are already born with at the time of birth. However, but the prarabdha gets exhausted only by experiences. It is not by you can exhaust prarabdha by knowledge. Knowledge cannot burn the prarabdha vasanas. It has to be manifested because it's already expressed as body, mind, intellect. It's already converted into actions. So there is no more the subtle form. So it has to be exhausted, consumed by life's experiences. But all the other creatures, all the other living beings except a human being, exhaust only the prarabdha vasanas at the karma with which they are born. So why in their lifetime they exhaust prarabdha? A tiger, it lives like a tiger, it born with the tiger tendencies because that is prarabdha. The thoughts, vasanas, the thoughts, desires and actions in the body, mind, all these totally because of the tiger's nature, essential nature, which is prarabdha. In its lifetime, it will only live whatever it is designed, constrained, and it exhausts and it dies. So, whatever it is born, it will only exhaust it, which is they live on prarabdha vasanas, they exhaust prarabdha vasanas. All living creatures are denied the access to sanchita vasanas in their lifetime, except a human being. A human being alone, even though born with prarabdha vasanas, he has this great choice, privilege, opportunity to access the sanchita and exhaust all sanchita while living, going through this prarabdha experiences is the great privilege and opportunity for prerogative of human being alone. So this is what he is talking about, and have no, the animals have no capacity to deal with the sanchita because they have not provided this intellect, buddhi, to access the sanchita. The like it is like the government of India, for example, granting its citizens only a fixed sum of money for him to spend abroad. Imagine a citizen of India who would like to spend money, he is being granted X amount of money in to spend in abroad. While he is abroad, he exhausts that exchange in a foreign country. So he can access the entire money what he got from the foreign country as well, because that is the accessibility even though he is in another country. But he cannot access or spend his own financial resources in his country while he is in abroad. That is the because government has given that restriction. So a foreigner, whereas a foreigner whose country is free from such foreign exchange regulation may also take a limited exchange of money with him, but he enjoys the liberty to access, even exhaust the financial resources at home as well while he is in abroad. So that is the privilege. So it all depends upon what type of capacity of foreign exchange spending regulation, depending upon the country to country, is the analysis here. So an animal born embodiment, it lives in prarabdha, dies in prarabdha, it cannot exhaust the sanchita, the vasanas, and cannot reach the enlightenment. Whereas a human being born, he has got the privilege to exhaust the sanchita while he is living as in the prarabdhic life of exhausting his existing life. So this is the unique privilege of human being alone, is the distinction made in the example of a country who gives the privilege to expend money when he is abroad, and a country which doesn't give privilege to gives the freedom to exhaust his financial things to access from abroad. So the freedom that the foreigner enjoys with his entire wealth is like that of a human being, and able to deal with his sanchita, entire sanchita he can exhaust during his lifetime and reach the ultimate state of enlightenment. Whereas, and the restriction is imposed on an Indian is like an animal being restricted to the exhaustion of his prarabdha alone. So no animal, no living creature other than human being has any privilege or any capacity to exhaust the sanchita vasanas except its prarabdha, and it simply goes back to the sanchita for next level of vasanas for fructification. It has no access and to the sanchita and can reach the enlightenment except a human being. This beautifully portrayed in the example of the extrinsic conduct of a enlightened person by great example called a self-realized soul, how he is able to live after realization as well by exhausting sanchita, also explained in the fully example by great saint Swami Ramtirtha, how an enlightened soul after reaching enlightenment is still living, is not dead, but what is his conduct, what is his nature, what is his exhibitionism in the world, how he is functioning, his entire thing explained. So the self-realized souls, different periods of time, they demonstrated after exhausting sanchita, they are still living. So you are living because your prarabdha vasanas you got to experience, and then only they will exhaust. Without experiencing, they cannot be exhausted through knowledge. Therefore, after sanchita has been exhausted, and in their lifetime they reach the enlightenment, such people are called self-realized souls, have demonstrated a wide range of extrinsic conduct. They lived a different variety of lifestyles in various places and various periods of history, and their post realization lives have been distinct and different. So every living realized soul have a distinct and different natures, characters, exhibition of their works, yet they are all remained intrinsically in the self and self alone. They become one with the self. They are nothing but self realized, God realized, like a brilliant spectrum of colors emerging from colorless light, which is the single white color. Each color exhibits a beauty of its own. Every color has its own beauty and its nature. So does every enlightened Mahatmas. They displayed different varieties of their external conduct in the world. They displayed different distinct magnificence, a beautiful and graceful perfection they percolated everywhere. Their actions, the enlightened masters' actions, however, differ widely, though they all spring from the depths of spiritual enlightenment from the one divine self, because they merged with the divine self and they are the embodiment of divinity and divinity alone, but their expressions are different. Thus, you find a marked difference in the external manifestation of divine souls from the time immemorial. Even the recent sages and saints like Swami Ramatirtha, Saint Tyagaraja, and Ramana Maharshi, all these great enlightened souls, were poles apart at their in their expression, manifestation, lifestyle. Ramana Maharshi, whole lifetime he observed silence practically all his lifetime. After enlightenment, post enlightenment, he never spoke. He always maintained silence, but he lived and he passed it. Whereas he hardly moved out of the small town of Tiruvannamalai in Chennai, near South India, while the Saint Tyagaraja gave out a great divine ecstatic music of Carnatic classical music. He sang and sang and sang and electrified the entire, enthralled the audiences. He sang all through his life. After enlightenment also, he continued. Distinct from the two, Swami Ram Tirtha, the other saint, is dynamic. He enthralled the world with his electrifying speeches, discourses on the Vedantic literature. So, these three great enlightened masters displayed different actions in their post enlightened state of lifestyle. You ought not to judge sages and saints from what you see them act. Their actions you cannot understand. Their expressions in the world may confuse you because you cannot understand them. They are above you because they are coming from the plane of consciousness, pure consciousness. And you would perhaps gather up wrong impressions as well. You don't understand them. So, perfection in a human being is assessed not from the external actions but from internal state they reached, internal attunement with the Supreme God, the Atman, enlightenment. The test of perfection is the merger with the self. That is the perfection in human being. Merger with the inner Atman, the Brahman. Once you merge with the self and become the self, then is the perfection is attained, achieved. Until then, you are individual and you are living with desires yet to reach it. So, not you cannot judge the enlightened person's expressions because they are still living after enlightenment. Whatever be the mode of living, the self-realized leads the humanity through the path of righteousness, irrespective of the mode of living, the type of living. They always pursue or guide the humanity towards the righteousness. To the goal of enlightenment, they guide you, they lead you. Some sages have lived in seclusion, alone, never come into the public domain. Others, and they also observed austerity, simplicity, observing external austerity, while other enlightened masters lived in company of people amidst luxuries, material comforts, riches. However, both were totally detached because they both are merged with the self, disinterested in the mode of living because they are least interested, because they are already enjoying, reveling in the bliss of the self, bliss of realization. Their lives only promoted universal welfare and redeemed the humanity of their sufferings. This is the every enlightened soul's external conduct after realization till they passed away from this, till they meet their physical death. The enlightened one lives in home with his family, amidst his environment, society, with perfect objectivity, total detachment, and silent witness, inner witness, established in the self, in the divinity within. He remained absolutely detached, totally disconnected from the world because there is no world for them. There is only self alone exists in them because they merged with the self. Such a person takes the position of God because they become self realized. God realized means they become God. He is in the world yet out of it because there is no world for them. So he is living in the world but he is not in the world. Like a lotus leaf untouched to the water all around, he looks at every being and every object, everything happening in the world from an impersonal angle, objective angle, from a detached angle, from the angle of the bird's view, totally impersonal, detached, as you would watch a movie on the screen, the totally detached. When you look upon the world as a detached witness, the world becomes a source of amusement, enjoyment. Like you watch a movie and you enjoy a great tragedy or a great comedy because you are aloof, you are apart, you are separate, you are disconnected, detached from the screen. You are not part of the screen. Similarly, these enlightened masters, after attuning the Supreme Self, they are completely detached from the world and they are silent witness. But when you get involved, entangled in the affairs of the world, the same world becomes a source of sorrow and misery. When you have personal attachment, personal involvement, your suffering starts. The enlightened is ever positioned as a silent witness, a sakshi. That the name is sakshi. Sakshi means a just onlooker, observer, never attached to anything, totally detached, never enmeshed in the affairs of the world. He stands out as a picture of renunciation, revel in the bliss of the self. They are why they are detached from the world because they are enjoying the supreme bliss, infinite peace and bliss, which is what every human being running after this world of objects and beings for happiness, for peace, for bliss, which is not exactly there in the worldly objects and experience, it is in the self. So the ignoramuses do not look into the people's intrinsic nature. They don't look into the people's intrinsic nature. Ignorant people, they only see the outside conduct and try to judgmental about it. They are carried away by the external demonstrations. They make a great blunder in considering pseudo spiritual persons as evolved souls, pseudo spiritual persons, because they don't have any clue about the self and merger with the self. They are just displaying certain erudition and scholarship and demonstrating that they are spiritual by gimmicks. Some of the charlatans perform all sorts of fantastic feats, magics, and the and acrobes, the gobs, the display exhibition of about their spiritual identity through their way of conduct without really establishing themselves in the self. They are known as spiritualists today who read a book blindfolded, repeat another's thoughts. These are all the gimmicks they do, communicate with the departed souls and demonstrate such sensational activities. People consider them they are spiritual. It is actually misunderstanding. All that does not render them holy or spiritual or any close to the self. They are just as worldly as others who are another set of desires. They're changing the world in the name of spirituality, except having learned a specific art or skill to attract the masses. It may be admired as a skill or technique. There is nothing more to it, no more spiritual. because spirituality means attunement to Supreme Self and establishing in the Self and merger with the Self. A spiritualist can claim no more divinity, knowledge of the Self than a brilliant technician can. A good technician has a capacity of skill or talent to be technical. That's all this spiritual knowledge, so-called people for the material benefit or comfort in the world, but they are not at all connected to the self-realization, God realization. Some hatha yogis are known to have buried themselves alive in a coffin for so many months and years. Others have swallowed razor blades, drawn needles through the skin. They do lots of gimmicks. Others swallowed and performed many such feats, but these are all men far from being truly spiritual, truly identified with the Atman Brahman by gaining the knowledge and established. They are only pseudo sannyasis, pseudo spiritual, wrong measurement of spiritual identity. And their feats have nothing to do with the divine state brought about by the knowledge of the self and merging with the self. There have been instances of such men having committed heinous crimes, even convicted by the state. However, history has shown some true sages possessing this art, the skill of performing great feats. They learned it only to draw the people, to educate them in this knowledge of Brahman. Some people have the skill, but they used for drawing the people to guide them towards enlightenment, to reach the spiritual unfoldment, to reach Brahman. However, the knowledge of this art is no way in related to the spiritual state they are experiencing. It is directly with the knowledge of the self and self alone. So self-realization is acclaimed as the attainable. It is attainable in this very lifetime. If you are committed and you have an intellectual conviction and fixation, you merge with the self by using this life's opportunity. As self-realized souls are those who have merged with the supreme unifying self. If that be so, then how is it that they do not conduct themselves uniformly? Why every self-realized soul after enlightenment they behave uniquely differently from one another? This is a baffled question from many thinkers. It is only the great Ramatirtha who has given the most lucid, perfectly convincing explanation of this phenomenon of self-realization and post-self-realization life of the enlightened masters. The Swami described the life of a self-realized souls with the help of a pulley example in physics. So there is a pulley example. Carefully, if you understand the two pulleys which are connected with, one pulley is connected with two differential weights. The concept is when the weights are different, the moment of the pulley starts. So when the weights are equal, there is no moment. So the bottom line is that the entire pulley example explains the concept of apply this life to self-realized person. An individual is born in this world with the portion of the aggregate of vasanas, which is unmanifest desires, which is prarabdha. The total vasanas, the aggregate vasanas are the sanchita, which we have been studying. So the portion of vasanas which is born is prarabdha. So a portion of sanchita which needs immediate manifestation forces itself out to be born as a human being, which we are at this moment, born with that prarabdha vasanas at the time of birth. We bring them from the total vasanas, aggregate vasanas, which is sanchita. The prarabdha is the original acquired vasanas which get exhausted only upon the death of the individual. So the prarabdha cannot be exhausted through knowledge of the self. It has to be exhausted only through the experience and completed only with the death. of the individual. So the prarabdha vasanas, prarabdha is the original acquired vasanas which get exhausted upon the death of the individual, but the individual can within the lifetime exhaust all the sanchita if he is a human form and got the clarity and understanding would like to exhaust, he can do so. In the human embodiment only it is possible. You can reach the self-realization in this very lifetime. Thereafter, there is no individual possibility of born again or propulsion for his life's activities. Thereafter, there is no individual propulsion for life's activities. So, because he merged with the self, there is self alone propelling. There is no individuality anymore. When the individuality merges with the self, there is no more individuality. That is destroyed. Then the sanchita is destroyed, and that is the life of an enlightened soul. So, realization equalizes the disparity of the demand and supply. So right now you have a demand and there is a supply constantly demanding, and supply is coming from the world. These desires and objects of desires is called the demand and supply. But whereas enlightened soul, there is no demand, there is no supply, both are equal. The individual makes no demands after realization, but and he is born full of demands, desires. The world makes the supplies to meet the demands. Always these are miserable because the demands are more than the supply of the world. The imbalance is created by the iniquity between the demand and supply, and lasts until the point of God realization, self realization. Until you realize the self, this difference of the demand supply exists. Once you merge with the self, demand supply equalizes, balances. The unfulfilled desires, unfulfilled demands cause the motion of life, call the movement of life, call the actions in the world. You execute actions because of the desires. While when the sanchita, the aggregate of all unmanifest desires, the sanchita vasanas are exhausted. Exhausted, there is no more motion generated because they are all gone. There is no more desires, no further acceleration. But the original acquired prarabdha, original acquired vasanas, velocity remains. That is the state of enlightened soul. After enlightenment, he is not physically dead, he is still alive, but he is inside the mind and intellect merged with the self. But what is that which is propelling is the prarabdha vasanas, which is the original acquired velocity when he is born with. But whereas the sanchita, the demand supply balance, there is no more demands. That is the state of enlightened soul after realization till he is physically alive until the last day of his physical death. The post realization to physical death is the life of an individual is explained by his original acquired velocity remains, which is called prarabdha. He lives on because of his original acquired prarabdha vasanas, which is born with, which cannot be exhausted, otherwise experienced only till he physically dies. It is like a car moving at 100 kilometers per hour, runs out of fuel, it has no more acceleration because engine stops when there is no fuel, there is no engine is closed, therefore, but it is still running because it has got the movement of existing engine. When it was on, it was some speed, some acceleration. The moment the engine is switched off, the body instantly will not stop. It will go from the time of engine stop, whatever the velocity, till it becomes zero. This is the life of a prarabdha vasanas of a human being who reached enlightenment till he is physically passes away. So, like a car moving 100 kilometers an hour runs out of fuel, it has no more acceleration as the fuel is exhausted, but its motion is continuous because of the already acquired velocity. So too the self-realized souls function differently because of the different acquired velocities while they were living in the world, their prarabdha vasana. So too do the realized souls differently because of their different prarabdha vasanas. They are born with different talents, different vasanas. If the original prarabdha vasanas are small, little, feeble, then their manifestation upon realization would be the same. Perhaps the Ramana Maharshi, who is all the time life, he observed silence because it is a prarabdha is a feeble, small expression. If the prarabdha was music, he will be like a Tyagaraja. Saint Tyagaraja will be singing all life after realization till he physically passes away. If the made up of great knowledge, erudition, and scholarship and command over the communication, he will be electrifying audiences and traveling all over the world like Swami Ram Tirtha. So different enlightened masters expressed a different wide variety range of lifestyles they lived after realization till they finally reach the Mahasamadhi, which is explains the they exhausted Sanchita, but they conduct their life after realization, after merging with the self because of prarabdha vasanas, which is the explanation, which is possible only for the human being alone. No other being has this capacity to exhaust vasanas and reach enlightenment and stop the next birth and break this cycle of birth and death like cycle. It's not possible because they have not given this provision of intellect, especially subtle intellect, which thinks about the transcendental reality and gain the knowledge of the self, which is the only possible for human birth, is the great guidance given by this mantra. So when one attains self-realization, one's vasanas, desires, and actions disappear. The entire karma is said to be exhausted. There is no more vasanas. The karmas refer to these sanchita, prarabdha, and agami. So sanchita is destroyed. The whole vasanas are gone and you reach enlightenment. So enlightenment is nothing but exhaustion of sanchita vasanas. Human being minus vasanas equals God. God plus vasanas equals human being. So Sanchita karma is the aggregate of entire stock of vasanas which we studied, where in individual springs. So various individuals in various births, various lifetimes are coming because of the total vasanas of Sanchita. So whenever you born, you bring only a portion of total which is called prarabdha vasanas. And these vasanas will be exhausted only through the experience. You cannot tamper with them, you can't reduce them, you can't do anything because they have to be exhausted by experiences only. Whereas you can exhaust the sanchita or remaining agami, upcoming vasanas, next births only by knowledge of the self. Once you gain the reality, knowledge of reality, you can exhaust all vasanas. So human being alone has the capacity to exhaust entire sanchita in his lifetime. The prarabdha, however, gets consumed only through experience, as told. But all the other creatures, unfortunately, except a human being, only got to live with prarabdha alone. They exhaust prarabdha and they get back to another individuality. This is the life cycle not given to any other living being for reaching the enlightenment except a human being is the guidance given. Therefore, it is our human prerogative, human birth, great opportunity that you got to fix the goal of spiritual enlightenment, being born as a human being, Once you fix the identity of the Supreme God, the Atman, the Brahman, and understand that you are made up of spirit and matter, and you got to gain the knowledge of the self in this lifetime to exhaust the ignorance of the Supreme Self, your identity, and thereby, once you gain the knowledge of the self, you remove your ignorance of the self, which is the Hridaya Granthi, core of your ignorance, not of your ignorance of the heart, and from there you remove the desire and actions. So this is what only possible for human life and human birth secret. So and then only he will experience the peace and bliss which every human being is chasing the world unconsciously for happiness, peace, and bliss, which is doesn't exist. Like Arthur Schopenhauer says, the happiness, the great German philosopher, is clearly defining the happiness which everybody is running after the world. They believe in the objects and beings of the world, the happiness, peace, and bliss, enjoyment. The happiness is doesn't exist. That like Arthur Schopenhauer that says, it is it is difficult to find happiness within oneself because you got to grow spiritually, develop the practices of spiritual disciplines and reduce your desires through knowledge and understanding of higher values and reach the divinity. By gaining the knowledge of the self only, you exhaust all the desires and reach the supreme peace and bliss. The bliss and peace is directly proportional to reduction of desires, not experiencing the desires, but which people misunderstand. The experiencing the objects will not give you satisfaction. Whichever gives temporary instant pleasures leads to suffering and sorrow. So, what exactly gives you permanent bliss, permanent happiness is the knowledge of reality, knowledge of the self, knowledge of your identity. That alone gives you permanent happiness. Once you reach the self realization, you attain permanent state of peace and bliss, which is immortality, which is deathless, birthless. So then you exhaust all desires, all vasanas, and you will not have future births, future deaths again, because it's a permanent, non-return journey is the great opportunity highlighted by this mantra 8. We will study mantra 9 in the next class. Thank you very much. Hari Om.